I said it last week, and I'll say it again this week. What a fantastic time to be a part of this amazing Star Wars fandom and to be able to consume all of this incredible Star Wars content. I mean, it really is. We'll get into the Mando stuff after listener feedback this week for those that still don't have the Disney app and might be trying to remain spoiler-free. But I definitely want to get into Mandalorian territory in terms of spoilers. I'll just spoiler-free say, I mean, again, really enjoying The Mandalorian. It's different, and that's okay, and that's good. I've been continuing to do my rewatch of all the films in chronological order. This weekend was Return of the Jedi, and I'm just looking at the calendar in front of me going, oh my gosh, next week Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and then it's game on for The Rise of Skywalker. And look, I've seen these films hundreds of times. I have them memorized, for crying out loud. So, I mean, to a certain extent, it is kind of silly to do these chronological rewatches, but it's tradition. You know, I got to keep to my traditions, and that's how I celebrate my fandom. But watching Return of the Jedi and having seen Episode 4 of The Mandalorian, I definitely got a better understanding why so many fans are gravitating so heavily towards The Mandalorian, because it really does have sort of the pacing and the vibe that's way more reminiscent of that original trilogy era than certainly the prequels or the sequels. And that's cool, man. That's amazing. But what is fantastic is the fact that not only do we get that, but we also get this incredibly stylistically different. Pacing is different, scope and scale is different in our saga films, and what it is we're going to be seeing here in the next 3 weeks from The Rise of Skywalker. The new shots that have been coming out in these TV spots. There's not a lot of them, but there's a smattering of certainly new shots. As somebody on Reddit had gone so far as to put together sort of a supercut of what they believe is happening in these shots within chronological order, and it was about 4 minutes and 30 seconds worth of just footage that isn't repeated. So that's about how much of the movie that we've seen so far, and every little bit of it, as I keep exclaiming on the show, has me excited. There's not a single scene or setup that I've seen so far that doesn't have me incredibly intrigued, and just visually the movie just looks stunning. Now, you can't get past the negativity in the fandom, and of course all of the discussion and talk around the extensive leaks that came out many weeks ago, and whether or not those align with the footage that we've seen so far. And I'll address that in a little bit further right before we get into the conversation about the case for and against from my mind. Kylo Ren and his demise, Ben Solo and his redemption. And again, I'm very much going to be coming at this particular commentary as I do everything else on the show, from a very personal, I mean, this is me, this is just my opinion, this is how I am going to be approaching this movie based off of expectations, what I would like to see, and what probably is the reality. And as I've always done with the show, I just hope that everybody enjoys it and comes along for the ride and enjoys the commentary that I have to share. Time permitting, I do have some more of the press that was done 2 weeks ago, particularly this lengthy piece that's got a lot of great information in it, this interview with Kathleen Kennedy. So I am planning on diving into that. A lot of it just kind of depends on how the rest of the show shakes out, and of course that listener feedback that we'll get to a little bit later on. All right, so a couple of things to start off on the new footage that we've seen so far. We've gotten, I don't know, we're up to like 11 or 12 TV spots. The TV spots are running about 15 seconds, not giving us a ton in terms of new footage. A lot of it's just extensions of previous shots that we've seen before, whether it is the Death Star 2 lightsaber fight, a little bit more footage of Rey versus Kylo without his lightsaber inside the destroyed Emperor's chamber, which was really interesting going back and watching Return of the Jedi, which I've said many times in the show. If I had to rank them, Return of the Jedi is probably way down on the list in terms of my love of the films, even though I still love the film. It's just probably the one that I love the least. But watching it, knowing about the Rise of Skywalker, the return of Darth Sidious, Palpatine, however that takes place, it does provide a really interesting new perspective on those films for me, because your mind just gets flooded with what you know happens next and the potential of what could be happening. And that's what I love about the sequel trilogy and what it's doing to all three trilogies. And something that I think I want to word this correctly. Something I think a lot of people, when they are discussing the sequel trilogy and the differences between it, the prequels, and the original trilogy, there's an aspect of this whole thing that I think a lot of people either dismiss or they just don't think about, and that is just how uniquely done the storytelling is in each individual trilogy, and how each individual trilogy in and of itself in those three movies is the most important thing until the next trilogy. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about this, but what I'm driving at is I know there's a lot of commentary surrounding what may happen in The Rise of Skywalker and how it may change the trilogies that came before it. And that might be true from a certain point of view if I can copy Obi-Wan Kenobi, but at the same time, these films have to do what they need to do to conclude their story while being attached to those original trilogies. And this particular tale that is being told right now about the sequel trilogy being at the end of the Skywalker timeline thus becomes the most important aspect of the story in bringing it to its conclusion. So, if something gets changed prior in the original trilogy, shoving nostalgia aside, shoving what came before it just in terms of the chronological timeline, it is completely justified, in my opinion, for something in The Rise of Skywalker to potentially fundamentally change something that happens in the original trilogy or the prequel trilogy. See, now I don't have to do that a little bit later on because I did it right now. I'll continue on this line of thinking when we get to the Kylo Ren and Ben Solo redemption and demise conversation. But that was the gist of what I was driving at. And certainly that was very present in my mind watching Return of the Jedi last night. It's kind of like this idea that the last battle in The Rise of Skywalker, the last space battle in The Rise of Skywalker, can be the biggest space battle we've ever seen in the Star Wars saga. That's acceptable because it's the last movie. I myself was one saying, going into Rogue One, knowing that there's going to be a space battle over Scarif, was thinking, boy, I really don't hope they go too over the top in the radness of this battle over Scarif, because you don't want to diminish the next space battle that takes place in A New Hope. That being said, that battle, regardless of all the other space battles, which I love, is still my favorite from A New Hope. So a couple other things in these trailers that were really interesting. There's a couple of shots of the Millennium Falcon and what appears to be the Millennium Falcon traversing some ice caves. And it looks like you've got Chewie and Finn and Poe and then Claude, that big wormy-looking thing that showed up on that teaser poster. There also was a new shot of the Millennium Falcon, that same crew potentially escaping from whatever scene that was, going through this bizarre space setting. The scene was washed in green. It was really cool with this sort of three-fanged looking space worm, and it appeared as if the Millennium Falcon was light jumping, was skipping through. And I know this is something that appeared in the leaks, and I won't provide specificity to it. And I'm okay with saying it now, so don't freak out, because we've actually already seen this particular thing in Star Wars, and I haven't heard anybody bring it up. So apparently, there was a portion of the leak. As I stumble through my words, there was a portion of the leak of the Rise of Skywalker where it talked about the Millennium Falcon doing this jumping, jumping the lights to light speed, but doing it sort of in sections, and it was called like skipping. They was skipping or whatever. I have a term in my science fiction series EMBARK where instead of doing light speed, I think it was light skipping. Maybe that's what it was. Instead of doing light speed, I do jump speed, which is basically FTL, faster than light travel. I just dubbed it jump speed in my book because I thought it sounded cool. Anyway, a part of the leaks was this light skipping. Okay. Anyway, so in the trailer, it looks like the Millennium Falcon's doing that. And you go, oh, okay, well, that's a part of the leaks. That's interesting. Well, it is, except for the fact that they did that in Solo. When they were going through the maw on their way to Kessel, it's a really cool shot. Never explained, but the Falcon's traversing through the tube of clouds, the cloud tube, on their way to Kessel. And I think this is when Kira and L3 are having the conversation, which I love that scene, in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon. And you can see it kind of does zoop, bam, and it lands. That's actually how it sounds. Zoop, bam. But the Falcon, jumps. It was really, really cool. So anyway, that's exactly what it looked like in the trailer or in the TV spot for The Rise of Skywalker. More of the chase sequence from Pisana. A few more angles. There's a shot of one of the tread speeders hitting a rock and going airborne, and then Rey takes it out underneath with her blaster. It looked pretty amazing. And somebody had pointed out shortly after those clips dropped that it would appear that those tread speeders actually have shields on them. And I mentioned last week, I just love this ridiculous over the topness of the movies. I think that's cool. Does it make any sense to have a tread speeder in Star Wars and then have it buck to throw a jet trooper off the back? No, but it looks rad. That's cool. All right. The one shot that I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about because I'm through the moon geeked out over it. And I actually went and made it my wallpaper up on Facebook. Well, there's two shots actually from the TV spots. There's a shot of a hooded Rey. She's got her tan hood up, and she's clearly back on Octo. Okay, so we're going back to Octo, which isn't a huge surprise. Then there is this shot of Kylo Ren's TIE Whisper in flames. She's standing in front of it, and a lot of people have already juxtaposed the funeral pyre sequence from Return of the Jedi next to this burning TIE fighter pyre sequence with Rey. She's standing there with her hood up, and there's just this the TIE is just in front of her, just bonfire time. At first I could tell it was a TIE fighter and it was a TIE interceptor, but I wasn't 100% sure if it was his. You got to really kind of zoom in on the photo because of the angle it's at. You can't tell the perception's off. You can't tell the length of the wings, which would have been the dead giveaway. But if you zoom in on the photo, you can see the really cool red accents of the ship that was in the first teaser trailer, the one that Rey faces off against. And then you can also see a few more details. The guns that are deep within the panel notches of the wings are definitely the ones from the TIE Whisper. The previous iteration of the TIE Interceptor, at least the one from Return of the Jedi, had a pair of dual cannons there. This one's just got a single. So a couple of things about this that were really significant to me. And that is, one, I love, this is completely superficial, but I just love it. I love seeing individuals who aren't supposed to be piloting particular ships piloting those ships. Yeah, I dig that. There was a comic book from probably late 80s, maybe early 90s. I think it was a Rogue Squadron comic book. I have it in my closet. But in that, the Rebels had stolen a TIE fighter, and then they used it on this mission. Similar things have happened in the cartoon Rebels. I just dig that. I just think it's cool. Because growing up as a kid, TIE fighters, those were bad guy ships. X-Wings, those were good guy ships. And so to buck the norm invites all kinds of different scenarios, right? Finn, at the beginning of The Force Awakens, love that sequence. Because one, it's rad. But two, Poe and Finn and Poe, specifically, I said Finn, but Poe, but they're escaping together. He's piloting a Special Forces TIE. How cool is that? He's supposed to be in his black X-Wing, not a TIE fighter. Okay, so what does this have to do with this shot? Because potentially it means, one, Rey flies to Ahch-To in Kylo Ren's TIE Whisper, which is awesome. It's like look, there's a very real world quality, and I'm really wiping out on this, but I just think it's so cool. There's a very understandable and real world quality and relatability to that happening. And I love cars, and I love NASCAR. I drive, for as ridiculous as it sounds, I drive a metallic blue 2014 Kia Forte Coupe, two-door. Okay, right? That's what coupe means, John. So I got this back in Tucson. They don't even sell them anymore. Kia discontinued making them, and my dream car is a Spider that they make. Be that as it may. So they actually discontinued making them, and I went to I had it on a lease, and I actually went to turn it in and potentially get something else, and I found out there wasn't a single updated. I think it was 2017. There wasn't a single Kia Forte Coupe in the state. And all the other ones I didn't really like. So I still have my 2014 Kia Forte Coupe, and I love that car, right? I love it like Han loves the Millennium Falcon. I actually used it when I gave directions to the cover artist for EMBARK Book 1 when he was designing a handful of the hero ships, my main character, Taft. I told him, I said, hey, if you can incorporate any of my 2014 Kia Forte Coupe into the design of the spaceship, based off of this description, go for it. So there's something about somebody else driving somebody else's car. My wife in my car, right? It's just different. It's cool. My wife's driving my car. Like when I see her driving my car, I just think that's cool. That's my car she's driving. So seeing Rey piloting a TIE Whisper would be awesome. All right. I'm really wiping out on this. There's a bigger point here that I want to make, and something that is a dream of mine to see in this movie. All right. So we assume this is not the end of the film. It could be, but I assume it's not the end of the film. Certainly the end of the film involves, big, ugly, crunchy, wrinkly bad guy, and that end battle. So unless we go back to Ahch-To afterwards, which I suppose is entirely possible. But if it's not at the end of the film, which would really speak volumes into certain things that may happen in the film if that is at the end of the film, but I'm not going to get into that because I don't believe this is the end of the film. And she goes to Ahch-To, okay, and she's obviously, if she's burning the ship, doesn't want to leave. She's going to exile herself, and that may be what she's doing. And if she is doing that, then I imagine a certain Force ghost named Luke Skywalker will show up and tell her to get back in the fight, just like Obi-Wan did in Return of the Jedi. That makes the most sense. But how does she get back to the fight? This is what I'm so excited about. I have a dream of seeing Rey piloting an X-Wing fighter. X-Wing fighters were the good guy ships, and they were my favorite ones growing up. They are still my favorite ones now, even though they're not my favorite in Battlefront 2 to play. I prefer to fly the A-Wings. Be that as it may. They just seem to be more functional and agile. But X-Wing fighters are still my favorite Star Wars vehicle. To see Rey piloting an X-Wing, to me, would be that full closure, right? The image of Luke piloting his X-Wing, and I've got a couple of the Hasbro ones and with Luke in them and whatnot. That to me just speaks volumes for Star Wars. What is Star Wars? Luke flying his X-Wing fighter. That's what Star Wars is, man. To see Rey in an X-Wing would be just incredible. To see Rey piloting Luke's X-Wing would be amazing. So that's why that scene is particularly important to me, because I feel like that's potentially what can happen. The only thing they got to get around, though, is if that does happen, how... So you can imagine a scene with either her or Luke lifting Luke's X-Wing out of the water. If you're asking, how does she fly an X-Wing after it's been sitting under the water, I will use my stock response, and that is, if a spaceship is secure enough to fly in outer space, a spaceship is secure enough to be watertight and not get damaged underwater. May not be able to fly, but shouldn't have any leaking. If it did, you wouldn't be able to fly it in space. Okay. The other part of it, though, and the bigger problem, is that Luke ended up using a part of the wing for his door in The Last Jedi. So, we could get a montage. We can get a John Williams-esque montage of them putting the wing back on to the X-Wing fighter. Possible. We could ignore the fact that Luke used the wing as a door and just say, well, we'll just forget about that. Or she could just keep the X-foils closed. Told you I was going to wipe out on this. Yeah. So if there's one missing, you keep the X-foils closed. You only open the X-foils to bleed off the energy and the heat from the dogfighting in the engines. For those that didn't know, that's what the technical reason is. Lock X-foils in the attack position. It's because the engines can overheat, especially when they're clamped down together. So you separate the foils out, and it allows that heat to dissipate. It's Star Wars math, man. Star Wars science. Don't ask me. Don't get mad at me. I'm just a messenger. So that one shot of Rey standing in front of a burning Kylo Ren TIE Whisper has me dreaming in all kinds of different ways. And I also use the picture. There's a behind the scenes shot of Rey on Jakku from The Force Awakens, where she's putting on the helmet, the one that she actually puts on in the movie when she's sitting by the AT-AT foot. She's underneath one of the tarps, and she's with the production crew putting it on. I actually used that picture for my wife's photograph for her profile on my phone. Which is really kind of ridiculous because my wife is incredibly attractive and I should just go and use a photo of her, but that just was inspiring. And I felt like being different. I think I'm just still a regular icon, so whatevs. If I'm just the regular blank face NPC icon, she gets to be Rey. All right, anything else from the looking at my notes of the TV spots? No, if you're watching this, the video version of it, you've been seeing the spots running in the background. For those that don't know, this exact version of the podcast is also available in a video form under My Nerd World, a Star Wars show on YouTube. And I add a lot of photographs and videos, and like I said, I've been running the different new TV spots in the course of this little conversation. So again, you can go to YouTube, check it out there. You can leave a comment there as well, and of course, you can always leave a comment at TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. All right, let's go and switch some gears, shall we?
Something inside me has always been there, but now it's awake. And I need help.
So there is a lot of concern within a segment of the fandom right now. And I say a lot, that's relatively speaking. Okay, I know that Kylo and Rey, or Rey and Kylo, an iteration of that, hashtag either Kylo and Rey or hashtag Rey and Kylo, that was trending on Twitter over the Thanksgiving holiday. There's a lot of discussion about Reylo, and I say that a big portion of the fandom, but again, that's relatively speaking because I follow a lot of people who are Reylos. I'm a Reylo, right? I love that dynamic. I think that's what this sequel trilogy is all about. But this continued discussion over what's going to happen with Kylo Ren, redemption, and his potential demise. I wanted to spend some time talking about that on the show this week. I feel like the past few shows have deviated more into the newsy side of things and covering just stuff that's been released and talking about the images and whatnot, which is cool. I'd love to do that. But at the same time, I do want to focus back in on the story and the potential of what we can see and offer up some cases for and against choices that may be made in The Rise of Skywalker. I in no way, shape, or form know how this movie is going to end. I have read leaks and spoilers, and even ones recently this week, which is the whole reason why I brought this up, because they're sparking a lot of controversy. Whether or not they're true, I don't know. There's a legitimate question over these leaks, and it's something that I covered a few weeks back from somebody who was within the industry talking about how the promotional footage gets edited, how it's given out to two different companies to get edited, and potentially it's from that footage that's been released to promotional trailer editing, producing companies that may have been driving these leaks and this potential plot, this laid out plot of the entire film for The Rise of Skywalker. And that's what's really interesting about this particular round of leaks and speculation with this movie, because for The Force Awakens, the movie was spoiled from the onset. MakingStarWars.net and I think another outlet, it might have been MillenniumFalcon.com, got their hands on the shooting schedule. And so, just based off of things that were seen when it comes to concept art, the shooting schedule, and then certainly as we got closer and closer to The Force Awakens, as promotional material came out, that all confirmed those leaks. Those leaks, though, were clearly based off the shooting schedule and came out long before there was any footage, and probably a lot of the footage even shot. Okay. For me, and what this insider said about these leaks was the fact that the time when they started coming out would have aligned with the time that these production companies would have been getting the footage to start creating the TV spots, the teasers, and the trailers. So the TV spots, the teasers, and the trailers have all aligned with the leaks, but the question still remains, are they aligning with the leaks because the leaks were created directly from the footage and not somebody involved with production that had, and there was a narrative and context filled in, or are these leaks legitimately from somebody who knows the intricacies of this film in and out, and therefore that's why the trailers match, because the leaks are 100% correct, and so of course they would match with the trailer footage. Okay. So that's where my head is at on it. I'm not letting it ruin this part of my fun of the fandom leading up to a new Skywalker movie. I'm not adhering to anything. I'm very much keeping an open mind about how this movie is going to play out. If what I've read, it turns out to be true, I'm cool, man. The story sounds incredible. And then that on top of it, the footage looks amazing. So I don't have any doubt that I'm going to be enjoying this film on many levels. The question is, am I going to enjoy it on all levels? All right, so getting into Kylo Ren, redemption, demise, case for and against. I don't think there's any way that Ben Solo doesn't return. Kylo Ren will do something to be redeemed, and Ben Solo will be present in some way, shape, or form in this film. It will be in my opinion, the opposite of what happened with Anakin and renouncing the Jedi Order, pledging himself to Darth Sidious and turning to the dark side. We're going to get the reverse of that. It's going to be Kylo Ren finally embracing the light and letting go of the dark side, and then being there in the end to assist in this final confrontation against Darth Sidious, against Palpatine. Okay, so Ben's getting redeemed. That's what I'm trying to say with that. The real question is, okay, what happens after redemption, and what about his demise? Okay, so the case for Ben Solo living, for me personally, is pretty easy and pretty straightforward. There was a difference when it comes to Darth Vader, his redemption at the end of Return of the Jedi. He kind of played himself out. What I mean by that is he was bad, did some horrible, murderous things. Darth Vader did. Anakin Skywalker did. So has Ben Solo, Kylo Ren. You can very easily make the argument that it's a difference from the standpoint of Snoke had been manipulating him from a very early age. Okay. You could say that about Palpatine as well when it comes to Anakin Skywalker, if we're going to start having these particular arguments and discussions. I'm just putting it all out there, okay? This is more just statements of fact. When it came to Darth Vader, though, that's a real tough one, because I've made the joke of, if Vader lived at the end of Return of the Jedi and Luke took him back to the celebration on Endor, going back to the original release of Return of the Jedi when Yub-Nub, it would be really awkward to have Luke come walking in. Hey, everybody, this is my dad. Hey, everybody, I'm Vader. I'm very sorry for all the murdering. That would have been difficult. So how do you have Vader live and that not happen? Well, Vader would have to go off and be by himself. Okay, well, what kind of life is that? Luke goes with him. What kind of life is that for Luke? Okay. It was pretty clear at the end of Return of the Jedi that Vader would, sacrifice renounce the dark side, embrace the light side to save his son. In the end, he gets redeemed, and he gets to Force Ghost kick it as a young, handsome Hayden Christensen at the end of Return of the Jedi. The sequel trilogy is different. This is clearly Rey Nobody at this point and Kylo Ren Ben Solo's story. You can't, in my opinion, make exactly a 1-to-1 argument for Ben Solo to die having been redeemed and needing to die for the same reason that Vader died, okay? Because there's the Rey component. In my opinion, you can very easily go and have Kylo Ren denounce the dark side, embrace the light side, there at the end, defeats the ultimate baddie, and then after all the loose ends are all the loose ends are tied up, he needs to be off and to go off by himself. He can't just join the resistance. I mean, he still killed Han Solo. He still was a part of taking out the Hosnia system, even though he wasn't a fan of that. I know, I get that, right? He still had his kitty litter filled with ashes. So you can have a redeemed Ben Solo, but I think there is a level of, well, he's got to be off by himself. And that's where I think there is a very touching story of Rey not having anybody anymore. Never really, even though that's her family within the Rebel Alliance, within the Resistance, it's still, she doesn't have anybody. So it would make sense to me that she would be there as the person who helped to bring Kylo Ren back, and that she is going to be the one who will be his companion as we end this saga, as he lives in exile with the woman that he potentially loves. Okay, so there's your pretty easy, straightforward redemption story. That's full Reylo. We went there. Okay, so then we have the other version. The other version, and I know, in my opinion, okay, I'm not saying, and I know this is there's gonna be some of you that'll go, John, don't go there. Don't you do it, John. I'm gonna do it because it's relevant. I do think the Kylo Ren Ben Solo redemption, in the eyes of the casual fan, if it's followed by Kylo Ren's demise, that's the expectation of the casual fan. And why do I think that? Because I asked my wife about it last night. My wife, who has heard me talk about it, who I've talked to spoilers about with it, has watched all the films multiple times, okay? Likes The Last Jedi. She understands the Reylo dynamic. I asked her last night, hey, Ben, Kylo Ren turns from the dark side, is redeemed Ben Solo, live or die. She goes, oh, he still has to die. It was as if a million fans of my nerd world suddenly cried out in terror, and then they were suddenly silenced because they turned off the sound of John's voice at the horrible words that they heard him say about his lovely wife. I'm not saying all of fandom, but I'm saying that's where the casual fandom's head is at, okay? That's where a lot of young people's head is at. I did a similar poll with my buddy Kyle's friend, who's 12 or 13 years old, and he was very much of the opinion, well, even if Kylo Ren goes to the good side, he did a lot of bad stuff, he's going to have to die. Now, I know the arguments, and they're valid when it comes to what that means if Kylo Ren dies in The Rise of Skywalker for a big portion of the fandom. And certainly the Reddit leaks page has had their opinion about this for a long time, and the majority of people do not want to see that happen. That being said, I think there is a way that it works, and it goes back to what I said earlier. I'm not, and by the way, I just want to preface this. I'm not saying this is what I want. I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm just saying it may happen, and if it does happen, I'm also of the opinion that it will be okay if this is the story that the writers and creators wanted to tell, and they felt that this was the best conclusion. I trust that they are going to work all this out on screen. If you verbally go and describe any of these films, particularly 3 and 7, there's a lot in there that doesn't make any sense if you don't see contextually within the story how this whole thing is playing out. Let me give you an example, okay? This is the case against him, right? This is sort of the case against Ben Solo living at the end of the film, meaning this is the argument that says Ben Solo dies at the end of The Rise of Skywalker. Okay. I did mention all those other horrible things that Kylo Ren did do. He would certainly have to pay some sort of price for the murder of his father. That's a tough one. Okay. Now, the movies have done a really, really good job of sort of laying the redemption track out, especially the holding off from killing of his mother. And I think the best way to handle it and keep him alive would be to make sure that during the course of The Rise of Skywalker, there's enough sacrifices made to the audience where they're convinced that he has genuinely turned and feels legit remorse over what he's done in the past. He's truly sorry for what he's done. But the case for him actually dying in the film, and why I think for a lot of fans it needs to happen, is because he did all those bad things. And there's a little bit of both worlds. You get a redeemed Ben Solo, okay? You get a reverse Anakin Skywalker. But at the same time, that individual still plays a huge role in making sure that the galaxy is safe and ending this saga once and for all. But then, unfortunately, has to make that sacrifice in order to put a period on it, and everybody has paid the price for that. I was watching, and this is a part of what sparked me wanting to talk about this on the show this week. And please, I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to go and comment. And please do, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Leave a comment on YouTube. I am not saying that I want one to happen over the other. If I have my druthers, I want him living. And I think that there's I think it's a 50-50 shot at this point in time, and there's arguments, as I've been laying out on the show, that go both ways as to why that can and can't happen. But here's one thing that I want to share with you, and then we'll move on about this particular topic, that got me thinking about this in real tangible terms. I've mentioned before on the show that real-world dynamics do not mean anything when it comes to the Star Wars world. You have a whole different set of rules. Murder in Star Wars doesn't mean the same thing as murder in real life. So that in and of itself creates a very interesting and unique scenario of bringing about a redemption of Kylo Ren along with him living at the end of the movie. I was watching the documentary. I'm a big NASCAR fan. I was watching the documentary Blink of an Eye. And I'll make this short. This is a Star Wars podcast, not a NASCAR podcast, but this is an incredibly poignant moment of the film that got me thinking about Star Wars, oddly enough. So Michael Waltrip is a race car driver. He was best friends with the most popular NASCAR race car driver ever, and that's Dale Earnhardt Sr. Dale Earnhardt Jr. was my favorite driver. Still is, even though he's retired. So Dale Earnhardt Sr. died on the last lap of the 2001 Daytona 500. Spoiler alert. Dale Earnhardt Sr. died while he was blocking with his car the rest of the racing field from passing two cars that he owned in front of him. So Dale Earnhardt drove for one team, but he owned Dale Earnhardt Incorporated, DEI. And his DEI drivers were, the remaining DEI drivers running in that race was his son, Dale Earnhardt Jr., and then his good friend, Michael Waltrip. They were best friends. So Dale Earnhardt Sr. died on the last lap of that race, basically blocking the field and from behind in the draft, pushing his son and his best friend to the win, and Michael Waltrip won the race. It was Michael Waltrip's first victory in NASCAR after 462 starts, and it was a huge deal. And in the middle of the victory celebration, Michael Waltrip ended up finding out that his best friend had been killed, as his best friend and the most popular driver in NASCAR had been killed. So the moment at the end of Blink of an Eye that brought me to this little discussion was where Michael Waltrip was talking about how people describe how sad Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s death was. Tragic, horrific, sad. And Michael Waltrip said, through his tears, I don't see it that way. Dale Earnhardt lived the life that he wanted to live and made the choices that he was going to make. And at the time of his death, it was doing exactly what he needed to do and what he wanted to do. He knew what he was doing was dangerous. He drove his car to its limits and stared down danger in the face every single race. especially back then. Even in early 2001, we just didn't have the technology to keep the drivers safe like we do now, and a lot of that technology and safety measures came out of this death of Dale Earnhardt, right? It did wonders for safety in the auto industry. I'm sure everybody, including myself, would rather have Dale Earnhardt Sr. here, but that's not what God wanted. So Michael Waltrip said in that moment he was doing what he loved, and he was doing it not selfishly, but for those that he loved. He had this team, and there's his son, and there's his best friend with an opportunity to do something that very few drivers have done in the most prestigious race of the year. And in that moment, he was probably incredibly happy coming off that final turn 4 and pushing his buddy and his son to a first and second place finish. He knew they were going to win at that point in time, and that's when he lost his life. And so Michael Waltrip said, what better moment to have that happen if it's gonna happen. All right. So what does this mean about Star Wars? Well, what this means about Star Wars and the conversation that I've been having here is that when it comes to the potential, right? And again, this is relative. I'm using a real-world example to talk about a fictitious universe, okay? So all things being relative, it is a Star Wars podcast. My point is that I'm going to give J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio all the breathing room in the world to tell this story and see what it is that they're going to do at the end of this. And then afterwards, I'll make a decision on whether or not that worked. But there's a potential here that if you have a redeemed Ben Solo who comes in at the end to be a part of what finally ends this conflict after all this time, then perhaps he's in the best place he could possibly be before his own demise. And perhaps that demise, much like Luke Skywalker's, could potentially have a massive ripple effect throughout the galaxy in a positive way, and might even be the best thing that could have happened to Kylo Ren. And I'll add this part. Again, these are just movies. I'd love to get into it. We all do. That's why I'm kind of getting deep on this. But thinking it through, and this could just be my attempt because I don't personally want to see Ben Solo die in the movie. But again, I'm willing to see how they play this out. If you had asked me something similar, it would have been very interesting if we were having these discussions before the end, before we saw The Empire Strikes Back, with the social networking and the YouTube and the ability for all of us to share everything that we want to share at any moment's notice. We could easily go and do that with that film, right? And have all these same discussions about whether or not, Vader gets redeemed and if he lives or he dies. And I'm sure there would be a huge portion of the fandom going, he dies, and a huge portion of the family going, he lives. Okay. But from Kylo Ren's perspective, with everything that's happened to him beforehand, there's trauma involved in that. You can make an argument. There's a lot of trauma involved in that. And a lot of personal responsibility that he would need to take, even though he succumbed. He was influenced by the dark side. There were still choices that he made. He made that choice to kill his father out on that ramp on Starkiller Base. There was no doubt about that. Right? He made the choices when he, cut down Lor San Tekka. Those were his choices. So perhaps a redeemed Ben Solo at the end of The Rise of Skywalker isn't even the best thing for Ben. There's that possibility as well. See, and it's those types of things that have me more than willing to wait and see exactly how they are going to go and tell the story at the end. And so, for those of you out there, and again, I follow all these threads on, and I read these comments on Twitter. I know there's a lot of people really nervous and freaking out, and I guess what I'm here to say is, look, don't be. Just go along for the ride. Let the storytellers tell the story, and once we walk out of the theater, then we can have those discussions on whether or not it worked or not. Because right now, all we know for sure is what the actors and the creators have told us and the footage that we've seen. Everything else, there's a big, huge question mark on. So in these final 3 weeks, why not just embrace that and go along for the ride and just enjoy Star Wars for what it is? Put your worries aside and just be like, man, come that Thursday the 19th, right? Come that Thursday the 19th, I am ready. for this movie and let it play out, and then make your decisions, about whether or not they were right or wrong afterwards. Just enjoy the ride between now and then. I know that I'm going to be backing off and looking at some of the spoilers. I already feel like I'm in a pretty good headspace right now about it, and I'm willing to let JJ tell the story and then make a decision at the end of it. All I know right now is that everything that I've seen so far looks absolutely fantastic. And the last thing that I'm going to do is hinge my enjoyment up or down on this film based off of what's being rumored online and the potential of what that could or couldn't mean for the impact of this movie. I thought J.J. Abrams did a fantastic job going into The Force Awakens, and I was worried like so many of us were. I think that Rian Johnson created a masterpiece in The Last Jedi. Knives Out is fantastic, by the way. Really fun movie. So I don't have any doubt that J.J. Abrams has pulled out all the stops for this film and told the story that he thinks is the right story to tell. All right, one more quick thing. I'm not going to get into this big, huge article. I do want to mention one thing from Empire Online, and then we'll dive into some listener feedback. And then after listener feedback, we will talk a little bit about Mandalorian and Episode 4.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
So I like the fact that within the fandom right now, it seems as if this narrative of J.J. Abrams hating The Last Jedi and wanting to retcon it in The Rise of Skywalker has almost completely gone away now, and I'm really happy that's the case. I mentioned a little bit about this on last week's show. We went through the article. I might be repeating some of what was said before, but Empire Magazine did go further in talking about J.J. Abrams and his discussion over The Last Jedi, and I just wanted to share it with you. After picking up the reins from J.J. Abrams, Rian Johnson made some bold choices for The Last Jedi. Killing Supreme Leader Snoke, Rey discovered for now that her parents were merely filthy junk traders, Luke Skywalker became one with the Force by the closing credits, moves that proved thrilling, fascinating, and earned to some viewers and not so popular, and earned fascinating and earned to some viewers and not so popular with others. In talking over again Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, Abrams found Johnson's surprising decisions to be a positive force in shaping the end of the sequel trilogy. Some of the things of what happened in Episode 8 that at the time I thought, oh, that's an interesting choice that I would not have made, weirdly ended up being beneficial for this film. He tells Empire, I feel like we're doing the best we can to sort of excavate what is inevitable. Some of the things I like the most wouldn't have happened if I had to make all those decisions back when we were doing Episode 7. Certain things that happened in Rian's film, and certainly all the films that preceded 7, were all inspiration for the cocktail that became The Rise of Skywalker. I just thought the quote was cool. Somebody made a comment on the Reddit speculation page that I thought was really relevant. And the way they worded it I thought was wonky, but their point was relevant. And what they said was that The Last Jedi was kind of tied down because of what J.J. Abrams did in The Force Awakens. What he means is The Last Jedi needed to start right after The Force Awakens, because everybody's going to want to see that exchange between Luke and Rey. Okay. You could have had a film that jumped ahead, but fans may have been upset. I probably would have been, unless you did it with like a flashback. Would have been upset not seeing exactly what happened after The Force Awakens. Rian Johnson certainly felt that way. And the reason the Redditor said that it really tied down The Last Jedi was because there was no time for any space to have any further conflict of the First Order take place, and so that was the story that had to be told. Now, I personally think that that was great, unique and different and fantastic, and suited for Rian Johnson to make the story that he wanted to make and to have these adventures within the story that are a little bit separate from the larger battle that is going to be waged in The Rise of Skywalker. And I thought that his comments were rather interesting. Perhaps Rian Johnson would have made a much different film, and maybe more people would have liked it if they jump ahead in the timeline, but that didn't happen. And not being able to jump in the timeline, again, created this interesting dynamic for Rian Johnson to go and play with The Last Jedi. That being said, I'm also of the opinion that maybe not intentional, but because The Last Jedi simply moves through the timeline hours after The Force Awakens, and we only get a day or whatever, 48 hours within the span of The Last Jedi. I think that there's a possibility for a lot of fans that don't like The Last Jedi to easily be able to skip it and jump right to The Rise of Skywalker from The Force Awakens. I actually think that's going to be possible. And I'm very interested to see if J.J. Abrams actually puts enough in the opening crawl, again, not intentionally, but almost inadvertently. He puts enough in the opening crawl to cover what happened in The Last Jedi so that fans that don't like The Last Jedi can still enjoy their closing out of the saga, but they'll probably just watch The Force Awakens into The Rise of Skywalker. I haven't heard anybody mention that. I mean, I'm not going to do that. I'll probably do that just as an experiment, because I'd be really interested to see how The Force Awakens ends up flowing into The Rise of Skywalker, especially in terms of the visual dynamic, because The Last Jedi is so different visually than both The Force Awakens and clearly The Rise of Skywalker. So I'll be interested to see what the fandom has to say and how capable they'll be able to just sort of forget The Last Jedi. And hey, man, for some people, that's great. And if it helps them with their fandom and still have their love of Star Wars and not have to be so negative about it with the final movie out and not having to, think about The Last Jedi, then good on them. And again, I don't think it would be intentional. I just think it would be sort of inadvertent that The Last Jedi essentially would be taking place in the timeline of where we normally would have had Episode 8 take place. All right, leave a comment on YouTube. You can email me, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Let's get to some listener feedback this week.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
All right, first comment comes from Severin. Says, I'm loving the Mando. I am curious if the little green friend is actually female. If it was, I think my heart might burst with cuteness overload, which would not be good, because I have to make it to be alive on December 20th. Happy Thanksgiving. They keep referring to Chilota as male. He. The Mandalorian has said that several times, so I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be a he. We'll get a little bit more into that after listener feedback. Let's see. Matt Titi-Yao. Matt Titi-Yao? Matt Titi-Yao. We'll go with that. This is and I really apologize because they say something incredibly nice. This is the best Star Wars podcast recently subscribed, and the best way to listen to your podcast is on the way to work in the morning. I'm like, forget radio. It's time to listen to Jon Justice and My Nerd World. Thank you, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Courtney writes this. Just wanted to say, great show this week. We've gotten too much content lately. It's kind of hard to wrap my head around it all. But you break it down so easily, I appreciate it. Loving this week's Mandalorian, Chapter 3. Going to skip over some of the comments here. You know what I'll do? I'm going to highlight this and italicize it so we can get to it after listener feedback. So we'll get into this after we get past the other emails here. All right, Kenneth Ashley says this. Big fan of the show. Really appreciated the shout-out this week. Thank you, Kenneth. That was surreal for me, just a common delivery driver. Ha ha. Dude, I'm just a dude with a microphone. There's a sock on this thing, for crying out loud, so I don't pop my peas. Okay, sorry. Really looking forward to The Rise of Skywalker. My girlfriend and I already have our tickets for opening night. Keep doing what you're doing, man. You're awesome. Kenneth, you're awesome. Friend of the show, Miranda, writes this. Don't mean to make anybody cry, but just now, tonight, Star Wars YouTube channel just posted a new video that says Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker special look, which had a combination of video footage over the years and today about how the Star Wars franchise has continued to make a massive impact on pop culture. Yeah, it was pretty awesome. I liked it a lot. They actually showed it to just the audience at Celebration last year. Oh, no. Celebration this year. The video was very moving, and it's exactly what all of us should be about. The passion, the love, the people coming together, all this nonsense we've all been fixated over the last few years, the negativity and the internet infighting, it's just a distraction because we give it too much attention. And none of that should matter because it doesn't. It's just a distraction, and we all need to forget and just embrace our enthusiasm and passion. I agree with you, Miranda. Oh, and one more thing. Getting into Reylo theories and participating in the community of these two has been hands down the cherry on top of all this. And it's thanks to all the Reylo theories that I look at Star Wars now as this classic timeless fairy tale and the fantasy that is on par with almost every epic, romantic, gothic, dramatic, and in some cases magical story. And not for nothing, I think some of us have been preparing for Reylo our whole lives, but just didn't know it yet. Anyways, please go and watch the video while you can and get out the Kleenex tissues too. Hey, let me comment too again. I hope that I navigated those waters about which way Ben's going to go in this film. Okay. Like I said, it's one of two things is going to happen. I think there's no doubt that he gets redeemed, but you know, a decision had to be made by the creators, and I am personally, regardless of what it is, and even though it may not match what I particularly would point to, right? I trust J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio to have made the right decision for the larger story, whatever that is. Chris Olivio says this: "We're the exact same age. I was there, too, when I was 5 years old in 1977. My only worry about The Rise of Skywalker is how do they bring back Palpatine and it doesn't diminish Return of the Jedi? I think they've actually already done it, to be honest with you. I think that was the point of letting everybody know that Palpatine and Darth Sidious was in this movie. It's just get everybody ready for it now, and I don't really see a lot of people saying, I need to have, maybe a few people are saying, I need to have firm justification. I'm not. Just give me an explanation and I'll go with it. It's Star Wars. Darth Maul. That's all I need to say. All right. Temazro S says this, or maybe it's Tamaz Ross. Either way, I apologize if I'm getting that wrong. But they say this: "You rule, John. Definitely the best podcast in a galaxy far, far away." Huh. Dude, thank you. Appreciate that. Caster writes this: "Vader helmet bit. I think that Kylo is on the snow planet and Rey is physically in Kylo's chambers when they clash sabers and destroy Vader's shrine by accident. I think when Kylo moves his hand up to his face, it's because a piece of Vader's helmet has hit him." Interesting. "I think then Kylo goes back to his shop, and that's when we get the scene of Rey escaping on the Falcon. I much prefer your version, though, but for the pieces of footage I've seen, I think that's what's happening." Okay, thank you, Caster. I appreciate it. Barmag writes, along the lines of his helmet, "I have to say that Kylo Ren's helmet is a mystery to me, but I really like your theory about the Knights of Ren infusing dark material into that helmet to bring Kylo back to the dark side, and Ren removing his helmet after the pedestrian destroyed. Could it be that Kylo Ren was a prisoner of his helmet, and that by Rey helping him destroy it freed him?" I like that. All right, got to skip the Mandalorian stuff here. Let's see. All right, I'm going to save this for spoiler talk and italicize it. I don't read these ahead of time, by the way. I like to read them fresh. I know that sounds really weird. I do a little bit of editing, just kind of on the fly for some of the longer ones, but that's why I kind of don't know, because I like to read them fresh. I like that sort of instinctive reaction that I have. Blanca Salazar says this: "Do you think the holocron from Galaxy's Edge will have anything to do with the Rise of Skywalker?" I do. Not because it's from Galaxy's Edge, but because there's supposed to be these MacGuffins, these wayfinders in the film, and people have spotted Kylo Ren holding something in his hand. So holocrons make the most sense. They played a big part in Clone Wars and in Rebels. We haven't seen them a ton, right? Except for kind of in Revenge of the Sith. So I like the idea of them bringing holocrons into the mix, and I think there actually is one. All right, let's see. Sarah writes this: "Hey, John. Just wanted to say I loved both EMBARK and EMBARK Treasure in Darkness. Thank you. Your characters are fun and relatable, and I LOL'd at what you ended up calling the new planet they settle on, knowing your love for a certain 90s beverage, Zima." Yeah, man, I love Zima. I don't hide that fact. It's my favorite alcoholic beverage when it's available. And in my EMBARK series, we travel to a real planet in our galaxy. Well, out there, Proxima B, right? Around the Proxima Centauri sun, star. Proxima b is alleged by astronomers to be potentially inhabitable and have breathable air. So I used it in my book, and it's Proxima b, so I shortened it to Zima. But I used an X, so it wasn't a direct copy of Zima. But it was an ode of my favorite clear malt beverage. I can't wait for the next book and where you're taking us. Thank you. In regards to the sequel trilogy, I loved how I heard someone put it. Some of the original trilogy fans didn't like the prequel, but the kids of that generation did, and some of those kids as adults don't like the sequels, but the kids now do. The point is, we are what they grow beyond. I wish everyone could just go back and watch with enthusiasm and the enjoyment of a child, no looking for political or social messaging, or getting angry about your theory being wrong, just simply escaping into a world being told. Yes, Sarah, preach it. I love watching Star Wars with my kids and watching them just to have fun. That's why I love your podcast. Thank you for being positive. I also heard there would be releasing Baby Yoda merch soon. Yes, and I can't wait to get him for my 4-year-old who is absolutely in love with that cutie. Have a great holiday, Sarah. I am too, man. I could watch a looped video of Chilota just walking around doing stuff. Just anything. Climbing up on a chair, right? Picking flowers, right? Laughing at bees. I can just watch him do anything. He's incredible. All right. Irene Davis writes this. Best podcast ever. What in the world did I ever do to deserve all this praise this week? I'm not that cool. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. May the force be with you from the UK Star Wars family. Thank you, Irene. I appreciate it. All right. LB writes this. Does Kylo need to destroy Vader's helmet to disconnect from the dark side? I'd say yes. Film is a visual medium, and for Kylo, destroying it is a good visual for him destroying his desire to follow the dark side. And if he and Rey smash it together, even better. She did say, "I'll help you," but shouldn't he have removed his own mask before then? If he and Rey unite to smash Vader's helmet, wouldn't it be after the literal face-to-face, heart-to-heart conversation? Good point. That's what makes me unsure of that scene. I can't tell if they are accidentally destroying the helmet in the middle of the fight or if it's deliberate. If Kylo wasn't wearing his mask, it would be much more clear. Then again, it could be symbolic of the fact that any amount of time Kylo spends with Rey, even if they are fighting, is time that results in his connection to the dark side growing weaker. Thank you, Elle, as always, for the comment, friend of the show. Snoke's missing hairpiece says this: if they're going to go as far as to have 5,000 Star Destroyers, they can definitely bring an epic Endgame style moment with the Force Ghosts. It's interesting. I watched Endgame the other day, and actually it was one of the more enjoyable viewings of the movie that I had. I didn't know if the movie would hold up seeing it apart from Infinity War, but I actually did enjoy it quite a bit. And honestly, I just watched it because it was the final movie of this current iteration of the Marvel Cinematic films, and had The Rise of Skywalker on my brain. They're such different franchises. They really are. And The Rise of Skywalker is following a very different movie that didn't set up, the final chapter in a way that Infinity War did. It didn't have to. Star Wars didn't have to. We didn't really know exactly what was going to happen at the end of The Empire Strikes Back. When it comes to the broader story, all we really cared about was getting Han Solo back, right? What's going to happen with Luke and Vader. I mean, that's on the same lines right now as what's going to happen with Rey and Kylo Ren. The end of The Last Jedi left it open-ended of what's going to happen to the Resistance. They're down to like 40 people. So that's sort of your Empire Strikes Back, Han Solo's frozen in carbonite, and then what's going to happen with Luke and Vader? How's that going to get resolved? That's your Rey and Kylo, and then we get a splash of the Emperor thrown in for good measure. And I'm here for it. All right, one more, and then we will say goodbye to our overseas friends that don't want to hear Mandalorian spoilers, and we'll talk a little baby Yoda, little Chilota. Let's see. Friend of the show, David, says this. So, I have never understood the appeal of the Fets, Jango and Boba. In fact, Slave One is my least favorite ships in the series. I haven't watched the whole Clone Wars series in its entirety, Thanks to Disney Plus, I'm binging it. But I watched all of Rebels, and Sabine made me like the Mandalorians. There was so much more to them than just the armor. I've been blown away by the season so far with all 3 episodes. Truth be told, they had me at the blurg writing. Chilota is a very interesting MacGuffin, and I do find it amazing that in 3 episodes, the main character has spoken less than 500 words. No, I have counted, says David. Oh, and one more, and one for the quotes my friend commented to me the other day that made me laugh so hard. The quote was, as far as my fandom goes, I don't know the difference between my midichlorians versus my Mandalorians. Ah, that's funny. Thank you for the show, and happy Thanksgiving to you and your family. Thank you, David. I always appreciate your comments and all of your comments. Again, you can always write me, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Or leave a comment on YouTube, which many of you guys do. Be sure to click like and subscribe to the YouTube show. Please, that would really be helpful, as I'm going so far as to produce the video version of the show. All right, I'm going to go ahead and use Obi-Wan Kenobi to officially say goodbye, and then I'll come back and we'll talk a little Mandalorian. All right, thank you so much for those checking out the show this week, and we'll be back again next week as we're counting down to the Rise of Skywalker. I got 2 Saturdays left, Force Awakens and then The Last Jedi, and then, oh my gosh, all the speculation is over and we get to see this incredible film. I can't wait. Talk to you real soon for those that aren't sticking around for the Mando talk. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My nerd world.
All right, quick Mando talk for those that stuck around. Really enjoyed the Bryce Dallas Howard Sanctuary episode of The Mandalorian. I personally struggle slightly with the show because I don't know how to view it as a fan. It's so weird. It's not a cartoon because it's live action. It's not Game of Thrones because it's Star Wars. And so I've just really been trying to enjoy it just from a purely entertainment standpoint. And that's what it really is. They've got some depth in there with Baby Yoda, with Chilota, having some force powers. The intrigue is obviously there. But this is this is very much along the lines of what George Lucas was inspired by to make the original trilogy in the first place. And I really thought the Bryce Dallas Howard one was so much fun. I don't want to say that every episode is better than the next. I really do. Boy, I don't know, man. The second and third episodes were a lot of fun, and I really liked that last one. But I really enjoyed this too. I'm curious to see if we visit this planet again. Certainly, Cara Dune's going to reappear. We've seen her in the trailers, and she's there with IG-11, so he'll be back at some point in time. I thought her character was fantastic. The Mandalorian is infinitely compelling, even though, as the friend of the show just said, David, he's only said 500 words. You hang on every word. I love the way that they treated the AT-ST in the episode, where Bryce Dallas Howard made this choice to turn it into kind of a monster and to give the windows the red glow to make them look like eyes. And that's the first time that an AT-ST was actually a threat in Star Wars to me. That was the first time that I was like, whoa, man, I'm actually scared of that thing. All right, so a couple of you guys commented. Let's get back to your comments. We'll first go to Courtney, who said, this week's episode, Chapter 3, was my favorite. 2 things that I thought were interesting. First, he keeps the scientist alive when he could have easily killed him. And second, he shoots Greef right where Greef had shown the Mandalorian where he's keeping his Beskar. I'm not sure if this is to depict the Mandalorian's character, to just keep the plot alive, leaning towards the latter, but I thought it was pretty cool. Yeah, I kind of got the impression, too, that the Mandalorian knew. I think it's pretty obvious. The Mandalorian knew where to shoot Greef, not to kill him. And Greef probably knew it, too, because we know that he shows up in later episodes, and so I imagine that was the equivalent of somebody knocking out their friend in a movie, right? When Parzival shoots Artemis in Ready Player One to get her out of the game, right? When any partnered up crew ends up knocking somebody else out to get something done, that's what it seemed like. But this involved the blaster and Beskar. Great point, though, Courtney. I'm glad you brought it up because I had forgotten to bring that up. All right, Barmag writes this, talking about The Mandalorian. For those that don't watch the series, what if there's a link between the show and the Rise of Skywalker? What if Palpatine is the one behind the hunt for Baby Yoda, and that his specific team is trying to clone a stable and powerful Force user? If yes, then it's possible that that has consequences for the Rise of Skywalkers. Could Rey be a clone of a Force user rather than being Palpatine's granddaughter? I mean, she could still be linked to the Emperor, but not by blood, but by a scientific experiment. The German poster, why is there masked Kylo Ren above and Solo below? Why the dichotomy, as if they were two different characters? I could be way off here. Let me make a general statement. I love the comments, by the way. Thank you guys for writing. But let me close out with this, and I'm going to sort of wrap up Mandalorian and the podcast with a little bit of spoiler talk here. So if you're here and you don't want to be spoiled by anything from The Rise of Skywalker, then leave right now. I'll say this about The Mandalorian. Chilota is the cutest character I've ever seen in my life. I could watch that little guy just walk around and do things. He's incredible, and he was amazing in Mando 4. I'm loving the show. So much fun, and I'm glad that we're going to be getting more of these. I would not want the live-action TV shows to replace my theatrical films, but I am more than happy, and I'm here for them when they make them. All right, so with that, let me make this a little bit official.
The hyperdrive is leaking.
All right, when it comes to, for those that have read the leaks, the footage from all the footage that we've seen so far from The Rise of Skywalker aligns with the leaks so far. There's almost nothing that contradicts what the leaks have said. The Jedi Paxis leaks. Okay, so a lot of context missing in there. I think there's still a big possibility that those leaks could all be based off of footage that was sent to third parties for editing for TV spots and trailers, and then somebody filled in the story and the narrative in the background. So some of the broader strokes are 100% correct, while the context stuff that we haven't seen may be stuff that was made up. I just get the feeling that there's some big, huge secrets that are going to be revealed in this that aren't going to go the way that we thought. The fact that these leaks were allowed to exist the way that they have, that there hasn't been any further pushback on them. And I don't know, there's just something telling me that contextually, the two big things, Kylo Ren's redemption, his fate, and Rey's parentage, those things, I still think there's a huge question mark on them. So we'll wait to see what happens. But I do not, at least for my headcanon, I'm going in with an open mind to The Rise of Skywalker and willing to accept, as I've said throughout the show, whatever they want to throw our way. All right, so that's it. We're going to wrap the show up with that. Be sure to pick up the Blaster app, the all-new audio social networking app that allows you to post audio clips of whatever length you like, just like you post a tweet. You can go to theblasterapp.com or Blaster app, all one word in the App Store, just for iPhone. Android version is coming next year. Follow me, my Nerd World, and Jon Justice on the Blaster app. I'm posting on an almost daily basis commentary about Star Wars apart from the show. I also post it on Twitter, where you can follow me at Jon, Jon Justice, or at My Nerd World. And of course, go to Amazon.com and pick up a copy of EMBARK Book 1 and EMBARK Book 2, Treasure in Darkness, based in the future, not so distant, here on Earth. Earth is faced with an industrial catastrophe that forces a planet-wide evacuation, while our heroes are thrust into the mystery of why it all happened in the first place and the fight for humanity's future among the stars. Book 3 is just about completed before we go to editing, and the artwork for the cover is done this month. So pick up your copy of the ebook for either book for 99 cents. You can also get the paperback and audiobook narrated by me, all available at Amazon.com. Search for Jon, Jon Justice, and EMBARK. And again, go to the App Store and pick up the Blaster app at Blaster Talk on Twitter is where you can follow them. Theblasterapp.com. Blaster app in the App Store, and you can go to mynerdworld.net for everything with My Nerd World books, podcasts, and more. All right, hey, thanks for hanging out. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll hit up Obi-Wan one more time to officially take us out this week. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.